Let's move on to the interesting Canadian Will Riley. Will Riley is listed at 6'8". He measured in at the combine, actually a surprisingly big 6'8" and a quarter. So he's really a list 6'9", though he does have the dreaded negative or at least even wingspan with 6'8" and 3/4, only an 8'8" standing reach. He is 3 size, despite the 6'9" list. He's a 3. Like that's what he is. Arguably even a 2 in the sense of like a Brandon Miller. But he's not like crazy big, and the skinniness is obviously an issue too. This season, in his lone season I should mention too, he is a February 10th, 2006 birthday. So his rookie season will be his age 19 season, I believe, but just barely. Like he just makes the cutoff for age 19 season. He's kind of young, but not crazy young for a freshman. He is, 10 months or so younger than or older than like Cooper Flagg and Noah Songe. So not crazy old, but not crazy young either. This season, in his lone season at Illinois, he averaged in 35 games, he averaged about 25 minutes a game and put up 12.6 points, 4 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 0.3 steals, 0.3 blocks, 1.2 turnovers on 43.2, 32.6, 72.4 shooting splits. Overall, at a 5.2 box plus minus, 115 offensive rating, 23 usage, 49.7 effective field goal rate, not very good. 53.3 true shooting is maybe a little better. 5.2 offensive rebound rate to an 11.5 defensive rebound rate is pretty solid. 16% assist rate to an 11.3% turnover rate to a 1.9 assist to turnover. These are the numbers that are really bad. 1 block rate, 0.6 steal rate. Did have an okay 32.3 free throw rate. Only committed 1.9 fouls per 40. He dunked 9 times, shot 65% on 103 close twos, 36.6% on 112 long twos, 72.4% on 116 free throws. Did take 8.9 3-point attempts per 100 possessions, where he shot 32.6, ended up being a total of 144 threes. Place to start here is the offense. We'll get into it, but there's not really a lot there defensively. And I want to say that I do think there is something here. I went into this having watched Shaka Jonas, thinking that there is nothing that I like about Will Riley. To be honest, like having watched Shaka Jonas, all I could think the whole time is every time this number 7 guy touched the ball, I got frustrated. There is something here, and it's this combo of weird, like craft and handle funk with some real ability as like a post dribble guy, like off 2 feet, with pickups and stuff like that going towards the rim. And just the fact that he is willing to shoot a lot. And he's clearly confident in his shot. And the mechanics are not broken. So I'll start with that. The jumper, he's in the 48th percentile on 94 catch and shoot shots with a 49.5 effective field goal rate. Not very good. The mechanics are pretty, though. They're Brandon Miller-esque, I would put it. Now, there is quite a bit of sway in his hips, and he's really kind of – I like that everything goes forward, but he shoots like a skinny guy and that his whole body kind of leans, and he's trying to maximize his power. He cheats for power a lot. He's going to have to change some things in the lower body. But the release is pretty it's solid, though it's not crazy high. He kind of shoots like a smaller guy. Like he has the Steph Curry – push up through the middle. He shoots, more like me, like I do that too, like push up through the middle instead of the high arcing release from up here. So that is kind of worth noting. He's just, his biggest issue as a shooter is just not very consistent. Like he makes some really, really tough ones, and then he missed like 5 straight open, like completely wide open ones. And I think some of it is the touch isn't great. I think some of it is that he has to cheat for power a lot, so it kind of throws out the rhythm of his mechanics some. And then, he took 99 off the dribble shots. He was in the 45th percentile, 38.9% effective field goal rate. The truth is he just wasn't a very efficient overall offensive player. So, you really are kind of betting on some of the funk here. He did take a lot of off the dribble shots. He got into them off of all kinds of different. He would take step backs. He would take pull ups. He'd take them in the pick and roll. He'd take them when attacking closeouts. He would take him in isolation. He would every once in a while post up a smaller guard and take a little fadeaway or something like that. But he's just not. I don't think the shot is good right now. I think it could be good type of thing. It kind of reminds me of Bowie Clintman before Bowie Clintman went to the NBL, like where it's like, man, maybe he can be a shooter. Now Bowie Clintman, I think, is a good shooter now, and there was positive development there. And Will Riley, we'll talk about this with a little more depth later, but is the type of guy who you're betting on being able to develop him into the NBA. He's not someone who has really any tangible NBA level skill right now. So you're taking that swing on him. And I think the shooting is a part of that, but I'm not crazy confident. That's just the truth. And it's not just the numbers. As nice as it looks, I just don't think the touch is good enough. I don't think that he has the classical mechanics you look for, even if I like the mechanics. And I think that he's too locked into kind of predetermining and doing what he wants to do offensively. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Stone, I'll throw this to you. How'd you feel about kind of how Will Riley goes about getting his buckets?
Yeah, I thought the touch for me was really intriguing. There's a lot of flashes of it. It's not super consistent, but there's a lot of flashes of just really great touch from three, even from the mid range on some of these uh, mid range jumpers that we'll get to in a minute as to why he doesn't always get to the rim. But he, I think, is for me projects to be someone that I could confidently say is going to be at least a serviceable shooter at the next level, if not a good one. Um, the issue for me is the the finishing there is really hard to project with any sort of confidence. He's extremely thin, and this is sort of the issue that kind of is the through line throughout his entire game is just there's no strength there. And without that, it's really difficult for him to finish through contact. He will try, and he's not like a contact averse person, which I kind of enjoy. Despite his frame, he'll still go for it, but it doesn't translate in a meaningful way when he's not able to absorb any contact. And this goes to his ball handling too, where I think it's funky. It has some interesting moments for sure. Um, but as he's driving, if there's any sort of bump or anything, he'll get bumped off his lines, or he has to kill his dribble and pick it up and figure out a new way to pass out because it kills a lot of momentum for him. So um, I don't know how functionally I buy the handle without significant leaps in strength development for him, and he's young enough to where there's room for improvement. But just sort of looking at his frame, I question it a little bit. He has a real sort of slender build, um, but I think really sort of the calling card for him in the NBA is going to be as this off ball catch and shoot guy, and I think the touch is there for it. I just question beyond that what more is there for me to really uh, feel confident in projecting developmentally that he improves on. And I don't really have a lot of confidence in that regard with anything else.
Yeah, absurdly slender frame, and I just don't see him putting on very much muscle. There's some flashes of touch, but I think my biggest problem is that he's just not he doesn't have like elite touch that you need for this kind of small margin shot creator, right? There's flashes of he's smooth, he's got some like funk in his handle, whatever, but he's not winning on huge margins. He gets blocked by smaller players more than you would think for a guy whose whole sell is he's 6'8". Like it's not like, oh, he's just like getting stripped at the bottom. It's like he doesn't create any separation and he gets blocked at the top of his jumper by a guy who's like 6'2". It's really worrying because he's just not winning on these very big margins, right? And his touch is not good enough to be constantly getting bumped off his line. He misses a ton of open layups. Like there's all this stuff he's missing, wide open fast break stuff in the half court. I think he's a really interesting cutter because he's so tall. He's just a huge target and he makes well-timed cuts. And part of that's the scheme. Part of that's he plays with guys who know how to hit cutters. But part of that is just that he's a good cutter and he gets good open shots in that way. And I think that he eats into off ball space pretty well. A lot of these guys who we've talked about, like not the same player, but like Trey Johnson, these kind of like 1D scorers who are like outside shooters mostly, uh, are way too standstill-y off ball. And say what you will about Riley, I think he moves about it enough to create value with his size and his gravity, where I think that's a legitimate way for him to add value. But I don't think he has enough touch for this kind of player, and he doesn't do much else. He doesn't really pass the ball. You know exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to put the ball in the hoop every single time he gets it. He's going to take bad mid ranges. He's going to take contested threes, and he doesn't even hit the open ones. So he's not like a great spot up guy. So I don't know. I get it aesthetically with Riley on offense. He's kind of interesting, kind of funky, but I just you can't be this bad at the things that he's bad at and make it in this role. So
Yeah, he kind of has to be a second scorer, right? I mean, like you mentioned, he's a bad spot up guy. He's in the 49th percentile on spot ups. He's a bad closeout attacker. That stuff is not good. He was in the 52nd percentile as a pick and roll ball handler, which is interesting. Without like having a crazy turnover possession, he was in the 90th percentile in isolation. Now only 48 possessions there, but still worthwhile, right? 69th percentile on cuts, which is good. But he's an awful transition player, and he's not a good spot up player. What does that mean? Well, that means that he is not a good role player, right? Like those are the role. Now the cutting is part of being a role player. He's a good cutter. I think if he makes enough shots, even if he's a bad closeout attacker, like he could be a competent enough off ball player to be like a second scorer. But that second scorer threshold is a lot higher, right? Like that's something that is really hard to reach. Vassell would be kind of like a Chris Middleton-esque guy. Now he's not that type of shooter, doesn't have that type of strength. But what I do really like, I thought he was an okay finisher despite missing so many bunnies and despite being so skinny. One, he's not contact averse for one, and he just has like this real kind of funk to him where he plays with really good pace. And he is like the handle is real in pick and roll and DHOs for someone this big. It's not a fake handle, Thon maker bullshit. Like he's actually hitting moves and playing with pace, and he's able to set up his moves and uses interesting pickups. And if he does get stonewalled, he has some post dribble counters off 2 feet. He even flashes some interesting passes. Now he's not I would not say a good passer, but every once in a while he'll throw one where you're like, holy fuck. Like there was this one, I think it was against Iowa, where he was in pick and roll and he kind of got a little too deep going towards his left hand, and he jumps and he sees that someone is open in the corner and he slings a pass along the baseline with his left hand to a wide open shooter. And that was like, that's great. But his biggest issue is that he's a big time predetermined and he's a big time tunnel vision guy. He misses so many wide open guys all the time that it's hard for me to act like if you just watch his assist and turnovers, you might say, oh, like he's not the worst. He had a positive assist turnover. He's not the worst passer. But if you watch full games, he misses so many open guys as a passer. There's so many times where he is running an action and he wants to score, so he's going to dribble and he's going to either take a bad shot or he's going to realize he can't create the space he wants to. So he's going to just give the ball to the next guy instead of finding where the actual advantage was. And so that kind of takes me to the conclusion of, and this is going to be our shortest video ever, fellas, I think. Will Riley is a fine bet if you really believe in your development system to take a guy like this and make him into like a sixth man type scorer. Like that, I think is the path for him. I don't think it's role player because, and we don't talk a ton about this. I think the defense is really bad. But he's still kind of like a pre-draft guy. You're taking the bet that, hey, in 2 years, this was going to be a Neat Clifford level, offensive production guy, because he's not like a horrible athlete. There's some funk there. He would dunk off one or off two. But he gets so tunnel vision. He's such a predeterminer. Even though he's smart and he's not a predeterminer with his handle, I just don't think he reads the floor well enough to be the type of player he is. And especially when you consider the defense, which Coop, I'll throw this to you, I don't think the defense is really all that good.
I would say it's disqualifyingly bad to some degree. That 0.6 steal rate as a perimeter player is horrendous. I think he has a higher block rate because he's just taller than guys. And so if he can stay within range of them, he's decently athletic. And it's easier to get a block in recovery than it is to get a steal in recovery. Um, and he's just so absurdly weak that there's basically nothing he can do defensively uh, and add value. So, Stone, do you have anything nicer to say or anything more specific? Because
I have a couple more notes on the offense, and then I'll kind of brush over the defense because there's not a ton there. But I do think offensively, he is predetermined, but also like as a driver, it seems a lot of times that when he's driving towards the rim, he does so with the intention of getting to the rim, but he often gets stopped like 5 to 7 feet out because he just doesn't have the strength to go all the way. And once he does get stopped and he has to kill his dribble, seems like he has no plan of action after that step. Like he knows he wants to get to the rim, and once he can't get there, he just doesn't know what the next step is. He has to wait for someone to cut to him, wait for someone to just get themselves open so he can make a pass out because it seems like the handle is very he likes to use it, but he's very confident in not using his handle. He likes to do this east to west move without putting the ball on the floor. It is savvy and it works sometimes, but it seems like he overutilizes that to where he's trying to just shake someone off of him using these east-west jabs without putting the ball on the floor. So it seems like he has a little more room to improve of knowing when to throw his handle out there more than he does. And defensively, like it seems like he is just not there physically to really have any sort of impact. I do think he tries. That's the one thing. Like I think he does have a motor. It's not for lack of effort. When he gets hit by a screen, he's basically out of the play every time, and basically that's every time there's a screen set for him, he's out of the play. He is not a playmaker by any means. He's someone that is probably more containment-wise what you're looking for, projection-wise, and it's just not there. He gets bullied all the way to the rim. He's very upright on the perimeter, so he gets blown by a lot of times too. Just there's a lot to work on defensively for me to have any real confidence that he's not going to be a negative. But I do like that he tries. Like he does put the effort forward. We talked about it too. The steal rate, like it's not good by any means, but Illinois' scheme, I think, isn't conducive to having any good steal rates. Like Yakuchonis has dropped, I think, 0.6% from international play, if I remember correctly, which is somewhat substantial. So I don't think he was in a position to ever have a good steal rate. It doesn't excuse how bad it was, but I don't think he would have in any other world had a good steal rate on this particular team. And the other thing, I don't know if you guys noticed this, going back to the offense real quick, is it seems like he has really bad hands offensively. I don't know if it was just me in the games that I watched, but like he would get past the ball a lot and he drops it, or he got stripped a lot because he's just not strong enough, and guys would just rip the ball out of his hand fairly easily. But I don't know if that was just me, but it seemed to pop more so than most perimeter players I've seen, where he just doesn't have good hand, which is typically something that we look at with bigs.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm lower on the motor than Stone. I thought he was just really bad, to be honest. I don't think there's a ton here. I think he's kind of lazy. He's not really in the right place off the ball a lot. I mean, Illinois' scheme is super conservative, but 0.6 is like that's really bad. It's a really bad steal rate for an NBA prospect. Actually, quickly, okay, NBA players with steal rates less than 0.7, kind of based on years. There's a lot of bigs. The non-big, I mean, are we counting Antonio Reeves?
That's stretching the definition of NBA player.
Not a single, just looking through, not a single player that actually has succeeded in the league that is not a center has had a sub 0.7 steal rate. Kyle Kuzma is the closest, but that was his freshman year, not the year he got drafted. Okay, so just a quick part query. NBA players that have have had a .7 or less steal rate. Um, Other than some bigs, and even the bigs like are not, except for Zach Edey, you could say could potentially do it. You have to go back to Kyle Kuzma's freshman year to find one that actually like succeeded and like stayed in the NBA and was a part of a rotation for any amount of time. Um, you could go back and find Doug McDermott is the last person to do it in his draft year. I mean, this is like a really, really basically a disqualifyingly low number. Like I'm not like a stat guy in that way where it's like, hey man, one stat is going to tell you everything. But if the only player that's really contributed in their draft year to do this is Doug McDermott, who is legitimately one of the best shooters on the planet and also was a great off ball mover and even still did not live up to really the draft range they went in. That's a problem. That's a problem. I just don't see it with Will Riley as we get into where we're going. I think there's some funk here. I think he could potentially be a really fun player. I wish he was going back to college. I wish he had more time to correct some of these issues. But the truth is, the NBA, I don't think is going to have time for him. And if I think he's someone who needs to be drafted in the first round to a team that wants to develop him and knows how to develop him and wants him to eventually be kind of a secondary scorer when he's on the floor, right? I don't think an NBA team is going to have the patience for that. I wouldn't have the patience for that. I would not draft him in the first round. I would not draft him and give him a contract in the second round. I'd probably give him a two-way and keep him in the G League and kind of see, okay, does something really click here? But I'm just not really sold on anything. He's just not really all that interesting to me, to be honest. And I hate to be this out on a guy, but there's nothing here that moves me. Stone.
Yeah, he's someone that I have in my like priority two-way range where I definitely would give him a two-way. Maybe would draft him if it's in like the late 50s or something, but not somebody that I would place as like firmly draftable in every class. Um, but there's enough there to keep me intrigued to maybe put him, like you said, in the G League or some sort of developmental system to keep tabs on him. But not somebody I'm investing heavily in with draft equity.
Yeah, seems like a guy who's gonna average like 25 in the G League, and there's gonna be a new post every few months. Why is Will Riley not on a roster? And it's just gonna be because he's not actually doing anything that NBA teams want out of their G League guys. So I don't know. I have him above like Danny Wolf. I'd rather take the swing on him. I think the tools are more interesting. He's decently young. There's something there. It's just not the kind of thing that I would want to commit to developing. And I think the defense is so disqualifyingly bad that I wouldn't commit a real asset to doing it. Right. If you can get him in UDFA and bring him in, cool. But
if he was 2 years older than what he is, I'd be completely out. Like this is someone that I would maybe considering in my summer league if he was a bit older. But the fact that he does have a bit of age to work with keeps me in enough to be willing to give him a two-way.
And I think that's fair. And I'd even understand people that are a little bit higher because they see like I said, I do think the handle is real. And for what it's worth, guys this big with a real handle are pretty rare. But the NBA just doesn't have patience for guys like this historically. Like, I just think that's the case. Even a Peyton Watson stuck around because he was a good defensive player first and foremost. And I think that is still, for role players, the side of the ball that often matters more. And like I said, I don't think Will Riley can be a good role player. That's not what he has to be someone who has the ball in his hands. And the threshold for that is just so high. He should absolutely be the type of guy that is a really good, German league player or a really good, whatever, like a league where he's going to get the ball quite a bit. But I don't see like top end outcomes here that are super intriguing. And when you also don't have a very good floor, just hard for me to be very in on. So
thank you so much for listening to the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast here on YouTube. If you want to check out more of our stuff, you can follow us on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. You can check out our website, upsideswings.com. You can follow all of us on Twitter, subscribe here on YouTube for more content coming down the line. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts on this pod and our process in the comments. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
He doesn't have a lot of just next step processing, I guess you would call it. And the other thing is that it seems like he you're gonna have to cut this. I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, okay.